I will start by talking a little bit about the new Eclipse version that we have in 11.3. So these slides I'm showing now are also present in the What's New presentation that you will find on the Info Center shortly. So we just start here on slide 4 to talk about the new web browser that is now Eclipse has changed the preferences, so by default the external web browser will be used. Previously it was necessary to go to this preference and change it, because we have always recommended people to use the external web browser. But since this was an active step, some people have forgotten it, and then some links didn't work because there are limitations in the internal web browser in Eclipse, so that it cannot show all web pages correctly. So there are several such links, but we can take one example where you can see this, and that is from the welcome page. So these links that we have here that goes to our Info Center previously, well, now it's open on my second monitor, but now if you click it, you will jump directly to the correct place here. While previously this didn't work if you use the internal web browser. And there are many other links in other places also in the context help, for example, that now works better with this preference set. Or not set, since it's the default external browser. Another thing that this Eclipse version introduced is a new view called the Launch Configuration view. I don't really know the background for it, but I think that some people think this makes it even easier to launch existing launch configurations, either in run or debug mode. And also you can do this now without having to go to the modal launch configuration dialog. In this view, if you like to use it, you can have it open, and the launch configurations will appear there as soon as you create them, either manually or automatically when you're, for example, launching a debug session for a TC. Yeah, the usual commands that you can operate on launch configurations are available in the context menu, but probably the most useful thing is just to be able to double click on a TC in this view, or on a launch configuration in this view, to repeat launching that session again. We can take a look at this if we open here, show view, launch configurations, we will get it here, and you can see here that I have already launched a few TCs by using the context menu on like usual. Then these launch configurations are automatically created and can be found here. And then you can just double click on these, and then you see now it launches. In this case, it was a debug session for one of the models I have in my workspace. So it's convenient, especially if you have a few commonly used launch configurations that you toggle between to quickly launch them. Of course, they were also present here before, so you could do the same thing from this little menu here. But here you then need to pick the right one, the debug or the run. Or you could, of course, also go to the modal dialog, but this is, I guess, what they wanted to avoid, that you have to open the modal dialog where they are also present. Eclipse also has this concept of favorite launch configurations, and I think that is probably an old thing that has been there for a while. I haven't personally used it, but this little menu here called Organize Favorites is something you can use if you have some favorite launch configuration that you quite often use. You can add that here, and then they will appear under favorites. So in case you have a lot of them, the most frequently used can be put under the favorites group here. Going back to the slides, we can look at another feature which is related to the code editor in Eclipse. They now support multiple text selections. This is, well, in my opinion, a bit advanced feature, but I know that some code editors have this feature and some developers really like it. It's basically the ability to edit at multiple places at the same time by making multiple selections. This feature can be used in some different ways. The easiest way, in my opinion, is to add additional cursors by holding down the Alt key and then click in the text document. Then you get additional cursors for every time you click. There are also other commands available that you can find in the preference page, general keys. They are in the text editing category, and they have names that somehow contain the word multi, so that's how you can find them. They don't have any key bindings by default, but if you like them, you can assign a key binding to them and then use them. For example, there is a command multi-selection up-down relative to anchor selection, which can make it possible to extend the selection upwards or downwards by invoking a command instead of doing this with the mouse. So if we take a look at one of these, I can see if I can find that example I had in the screenshot. Yeah, it's here, probably here. So this works both in the code view and in the code editor, and of course also in the CDT text editor. Yeah, I guess it works in any Eclipse editor. So if I want to change the calls to these methods here or functions, and they somehow have a change that makes it possible to change in multiple places at the same time, I can put the cursor here and then hold down the Alt key and click in more places here. So now I can type something, and then you get that text inserted in all places at the same time. And then when you click again, then it goes down to having just one cursor again, as usual. Switching to the next slide here, we can see that there is improved handling in Eclipse for large files. Now it's more flexible than before, and you can specify if a certain file size exceeds some limit, then you can switch to using a more efficient editor. I think this is a bit of a complement to the scalability mode that has been specific for C++ before, but now Eclipse has introduced this as a more general feature. Something you probably will notice is that the product encodings there has been a change related to that. So products will now automatically get the encoding set when you create them according to the encoding you have set in the workspace, which by default is UTF-8. But if you open a product created in an earlier version of Eclipse, you will get a warning that you see in the screenshot here to the bottom left, where it says product has no explicit encoding set. So this simply means that it found a product without encoding, and you're encouraged to set the encoding. The easiest way to do it is to right-click and invoke Quick Fix, because then you can copy the product encoding from the workspace into the product. I think the reason they added this warning is that previously you could get a bit unexpected results if you imported projects without explicit encoding into multiple workspaces where there was different encoding sets. So now you kind of are made aware of this situation at least. With this Eclipse also comes a new version of CDT. So previously we had CDT 10.3 and now it is CDT 10.7. There are a bunch of improvements and that I will not have time to go through. I will just mention one, which relates to the outline view. Now you can use special pragma directive to introduce sections in the outline view, which can probably be beneficial if you have lots of code there and you want to somehow make it more visible, certain parts of the code. So we can go here and find an example here. I think actually it's in this capsule here. I have added a pragma around this include here. So if I open the generated code for this C++ file and I then open the outline view, you can see now that this include of the math header file is put in within these lines here so that it stands out from the rest. And something that we thought about when we saw this feature in Eclipse is that maybe we should have an option to automatically generate these pragmas around all user code snippets, because then you could easily see in the outline view where are all my USR comments where I could make changes. The only drawback about this pragma mark is that there are some compilers will give you warnings if you from them. I don't think they give errors, but if we build this, for example, yeah, now it was already built, but if we do a clean build, I think, for example, the Microsoft compiler gives you a warning, yeah, unknown pragma mark. So this might be a reason why you would not like to use this feature, but if you can live with this warning or maybe disable it and would like to have these pragmas generated into the code, I think I'm encouraging you to raise an RFE for that if you think that would be useful for improving the navigability of the generated files. So if you want to see all the improvements in CDT, you can go to the What's New presentation that we will publish on the Info Center, and here are links to CDT 10.4 up to 10.7, which include all the improvements that you can read about in more detail. And likewise, we have a new version of eGit. It was previously 5.12, and now it's 6.2, and there are a bunch of improvements also here that you can read about by following these links. And last but not least, just mention again that now you should run the tool with a Java 17 JVM. And one good thing to notice is that the Eclipse version 2022.06 actually contains a Java 17 JVM, which you can use. So this means that it's no longer necessary to start by updating eclipse.ini to specify a different JVM, even if, of course, you can still do that if you prefer running it with a specific JVM. And refer to the system requirements for more information about this. And also, as always, when we upgrade Java, it's recommended to rebuild your own plugins. So if you have plugins that you have developed yourself, that you run with Artist, then before switching to 11.3, it's strongly recommended to rebuild them with a Java 17 compiler, since in the past we have seen some compatibility issues between, yeah, basically if you run old built plugins on newer versions of JVMs.